and welcome to today's podcast, Thursday, February 27th. And it sounds good in my headphones. I'm pretty sure we cleaned up our technical gaffe, and I apologize for yesterday's terrible sounding podcast. I'm curious how much of it you made it through. Not going to monologue here because we have a great guest. Eric, you say that about everybody. Yeah, but he's like top. I don't know how many guests I have over the year, but he's top tier. I get him once a year. No longer the new athletic director of the University of Toledo because he's been here 3 years. This might be our third or fourth time doing this. Bryan Blair is a thoughtful, introspective, forward-looking guy. We'll talk about seeing around corners and leadership and how he tries to lead. And I think there's some great nuggets of wisdom in here. Whether you are under someone's leadership and you can say, oh, that's a good leader. I wish my person was more like that. Or you are a leader and take some nuggets. And Brian's also going to walk back my doomsday scenario of the University of Toledo completely crumbling due to no more football program. So always a great visit. He is one of my favorite guests of the entire year. In fact, I enjoy a great deal of our guests. Sometimes I'm bringing somebody in to do a solid. Sometimes I bring somebody in and they're not what I expected, but they still give good info. This is one that I spent way more time listening to Brian because he's so thoughtful and he has so much to offer. And I offer him to you now, Bryan Blair, the University of Toledo athletic director. So I'll actually start with that question. Okay. Why women's varsity rowing?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a combination of factors, and probably you take it back. So when I first got here, I started championing this phrase, Team Toledo, the concept of the university athletic department and the broader community locking arms and pulling in the same direction. I've been to other places and I see a tremendous upside for all three entities here locally. And so how do you get the most out of those? Well, you work together. And so this concept of teamwork. So fast forward as we're looking at, okay, the university is certainly trying to grow enrollment. That's a challenge, right? Yeah. We need more bodies. We need more talented, highly academically engaged individuals on our campus. And then you've got a community with a really unique attribute that we've got a river running through our downtown. And we've got a local rowing community where we've got, I think, about 7 or 8 local programs, and there's already a boathouse on the river. And then you've got this entity in the metro parks that's just a rock star in our community, right? One of the best in the entire country. They just do everything at a high level. And they're putting, I think, roughly $250 million downtown in the waterfront. So you've got an enrollment challenge university, you've got a exploding downtown, you've got a rock star in the metro parks, and you've got a rowing scene and a rowing boathouse already. How do you bring those confluence of factors together? Well, you add a 50 to 60 person women's rowing team that will keep the highly talented ladies locally, but also bring in highly talented ladies nationally, maybe internationally, into our community, helping with the enrollment challenge, taking advantage of the Metro Parks infrastructure, and starting a new varsity sport that takes advantage of the river going through downtown. So always looking for solutions and strategies that check multiple boxes. I think this one might be the best one yet in terms of checking so many boxes. Yeah,
I think people in the community are going to get to know the name or the person, Chris Bailey Green, pretty regularly and pretty quickly, in the same way that you got out there pretty quickly. I want to come back to your hiring record because it's starting to become quite decorated. There's a polymath and an economist named Tyler Cowan that I like a lot, and I enjoy his podcast. There's not a lot of back and forth. He just fires off tough questions at his guests, and maybe he'll hop in. But because I have so many questions for you, you've been very busy. Yeah. One on the list is to go back to, I guess, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago from Sunday. What's it like? Have you spoken to the former Rocket that was an integral part as a first-year player to a Super Bowl champion, Quinyon Mitchell?
Yeah, so he and I text quite often. I shouldn't say quite often, but regularly. And I've been shooting him notes, and he'll interact on social media too. It's surreal to go from standing there on the sidelines and watching him get 4 interceptions at NIU. And that's really where he kind of made a national splash for himself. He had always been a really good player, first team All-MAC, but it jumped to a whole new level after that performance. You get 4 interceptions, return 1 for a touchdown. And then so now nationally he's paid attention to. Then you lead up to the draft, the Reese Senior Bowl and the like. And so the superstardom's just been meteoric. But with that, I don't know that we could have picked a better spokesperson for the University of Toledo and this broader community than Quinyon. I mean, he's a soft-spoken person generally, doesn't attract a lot of flash or out there. But the things he said and the way he represented us on a national stage, standing next to Roger Goodell right here in Detroit as a first-round draft pick, and then to go on and be a finalist for Rookie of the Year in the way he's played and just let his work do for it. I mean, that embodies this part of the country, right? That blue-collar, hard work, but also a gold standard elite excellence. Like, he's everything you could have asked for and more.
And saying no to Alabama when they came after him, saying, no, I made a commitment to Coach Candle.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this world of transfer portal, NIL, our young people have lots of opportunity. And I think what you understand over time, and certainly as you get older, the grass isn't always greener. And if you look at our individuals that have left the university to go, quote unquote, grass is greener, almost none of them have experienced success. And I don't wish lack of success on anybody, but that's just the reality. I think we've had one young man in Ray J. Dennis that went on to Baylor. It was the best player on their team and had a good year, but by and large, the rest of them have not experienced success, and then if they've had additional years, they've come back to a school like a Toledo. And so for Quinyon to stay, that allowed for us to win that game versus Pitt. And what I mean by that is we beat Pitt 6 overtimes. What turned that game around was Darius Alexander catching the interception and returning it for a touchdown. Darius Alexander may not have returned to Toledo, but for Quinyon the year before returned to Toledo and making a name for himself. So you can't disconnect these things. All of them are connected, but for Quinyon, we don't beat Pitt on national TV in 6 overtimes and then have a really bright future ahead of us.
Yeah. If I can get 10 minutes or chat with him when he visits one day, from an old Philadelphian to a brand new one, he was not soft spoken at the parade. I think I tagged in the video.
He's lucky he enjoyed himself.
It was great. I'm actually kind of hoping the Eagles, who are very tight end centric, draft Harold Fannin from down the road at BG. Next question. I alluded to your sparkling coaching hiring record. Yeah. I know the softball coach. We can come back to her. I know you're a big fan of that program. We talked about Chris Bailey Green. Arguably your biggest task, the football job, if it ever came open at all, and it's not going to, might have solved itself. But the women's program, as we've discussed before, I think is the bellwether college program. Mm-hmm. Last night, beating Buffalo must have been raucous at the arena. You hit a home run and got a great successor for Tricia Cullop. So my question is, how did you find Ginny Bogus?
Yeah, we could talk for hours on that. I think, one, you're right. I mean, identifying coaching talent is the most important part of my job because those are the people that sit in the living room and recruit 17, 18-year-olds to our campus. Those are the individuals that are the first call when you experience adversity, they shape the experience of our student athletes, and that's critical for me. You talk about Jenny. Jenny's somebody that actually came on my radar a year before we hired her. Tricia had experienced a lot of success here and done some amazing things. With that comes the attention of a lot of programs. And so even a year before she took the Miami job, there were programs interested in her. And so you start to refresh your list at that point. Everybody says, well, the AD keeps a list in their desk. Well, not as much nowadays, but I certainly have a notes tab on my phone that for every position, every sport, I started taking note of talent around the country. And Jenny had led her program to the NCAA tournament for what had been a really downtrodden Monmouth program that had not won very many games, almost never in double digits. She gets there. She leads them to the NCAA tournament in her second year. Their GPA went from like a 2.7 to a 3.5 over the course of 3 years. And then I looked at her the next year. She actually, what really jumped out at me, the year she didn't make it to the tournament but had a really successful regular season, she goes to the WBIT. She beats Buffalo. Well, Buffalo was the team that just eliminated us in the MAC tournament for the pursuit of our tournament championship again last year. So she did that at Monmouth with those resources, and not a slight at Monmouth, but it's just not the same. What could she do with our resources? What could she do with our fan base? What could she do recruiting to Toledo, Ohio, and building on top of that? And I think she came here because she knew our fan base, our investment in women's basketball will take a backseat to nobody. We elevate and amplify what we can around women's basketball. And I think that marriage between a coach looking for that with a really good talent that's got small town values and a values community with a fan base that's just eager and hungry to take what had been built over time, whether it be Bill Finley, Tricia Cullop, Mark Eland, all those coaches, and build on it and try to take it to a whole nother level. And that's our pursuit right now.
she took the job, if I recall, sight unseen, correct?
Yeah, I wasn't letting her come to campus. Not because I was afraid of her to come to campus. I knew every day that lingered, somebody else was going to call her phone and offer her a job.
Yeah.
And so it was almost like a quarterback standing in the pocket. You got that sneaky clock going, hey, I'm getting close to a sack. I got to get this ball out of my hands. It was that, and I just asked her to trust in me. And now I'm trusting in her to take us program to where our true potential is, which is, I think, the upper echelon of women's basketball, full stop.
For sure. Were you at the game last night?
I was.
Was last night the wildest, loudest night in her tenure so far?
It's up there. Now we play BG at home, and so that crowd gets really, really loud and into it, and we were able to beat them soundly in front of our home crowd, and so that was a fun one. But yeah, that crowd was into it. I think she and the Buffalo coach, Buffalo coach is a tremendous coach, so they got a burgeoning rivalry kind of growing there.
Good.
But I think Jenny's undefeated against her. So knock on wood, we keep that going and continue to grow. I think that's the main thing. You got a team full of players that. We had 2 MAC players of the year on the same team. And so to a certain degree, the other players kind of supported those 2 rock stars. And now Sammy, Kira, others are taking over as rock stars themselves. But then you got new freshmen and transfers that are coming in. I mean, our leading scorer last night was a true freshman that had committed to Jenny at Monmouth and then followed her to Toledo.
Who was that?
Faith Van Robinson.
Okay.
So Faith scored 15 points last night on her birthday. True freshman. He committed. She's from New Jersey, was going to Monmouth to play for Jenny. Jenny takes the job. Faith says, hey, I'm coming with you. And then you look, and she's our leading scorer last night and leads us to victory. So I think if that's the indication of the type of talent Jenny's going to bring into this program, in addition to the foundation in place, we've got a bright future.
Same thing. Not scoring as much, but it's not her gig, and that's not her role just yet. But Evilise Cole is the cousin of a good friend of mine from back in the Lehigh Valley area, and he connected me with her, and I just wanted to chat with her. But Jenny just came along to hang out with. And the same story. Evilise didn't come out here and just follow Jenny out here. You should pat yourself on the back a little bit for grabbing her and not missing a beat with this program.
No, I don't. Anybody tells you I'm not good at celebrating victory. I worry more about defeat and the anxiety of not fulfilling our potential. And so my commitment now, my thing that keeps me up at night is making sure I give Jenny the resources and surround her in a way that she can be as successful as I think she can be. Because I think she's got the ability to be an elite coach, and I think she already is, but even building onto that. What are we doing as a community, as a department, as a culture to make sure that she didn't run into any roadblocks on this road to success? So that's what keeps me up at night right now, of making sure I give her everything I've got every minute of every day to make sure she can be the best version of herself. And that to me is the true sign of any leader. It's not about you. It's not about what you do or what you accomplish. It's how do you allow everybody around you to be the best version of themselves. And so my job is to make sure Jenny Boggess is the greatest absolute version of herself that she can be. If she does that, I think we're all going to be really happy.
Great human as well.
Yeah.
Great human. I want to spend like the last half of our time talking NIL and all that stuff. Yeah. So I'll jump kind of ahead to May 24th. Yeah. Why did you, I say this jokingly, why did you bring another country concert here?
Because it sells tickets.
I know. The first ever Glass City Live at the Glass Bowl. Yes, I'm part of the crew because of my job. I know. I've been here long enough to know the country shows and like older rock shows make a lot of money. And it's a great business decision because I forget the number, but it's going to bring a lot of money into the school. Yeah. And this is where you come in, helping to find non-traditional ways to bring money into the school. How did this all coalesce?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been on this path to try to activate the Glass Bowl in new, exciting ways since I touched into town. And I think some things are already going on, right? You got the Glass City Marathon already happens in the Glass Bowl. We've got high school football already happening in the Glass Bowl. Most people don't know that because they're not around when those things happen, but we use it for a lot more than the 6 home football games. Well, then you fast forward and you got Italian Bowl. In my first year, and that wasn't my brainchild. That was already in the works when I got here, but it's been really cool to see that take hold, and every other year they're playing that game. And
this year will be bigger because 2 years ago we had Downtown Fireworks and the Jared Anderson fight. Mm-hmm. So this thing is going to be much bigger. People should not overlook the Italian Bowl.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. I went to the Italian Bowl and then went straight to the Jared Anderson fight at the same time. So you're trying to find these ways to – we've got the biggest outdoor entertainment venue in Northwest Ohio. I'd argue probably in a 100, 200-mile radius until you get to Detroit. So what are we doing with it, right? And so This group out of Youngstown, JAC, has done this at Youngstown State in their football stadium, but then also built out a full-time venue in town, and they've hosted big-time acts that otherwise you'd have to go to Pittsburgh or you'd have to go to Cleveland to see. They're bringing them to Youngstown, saying, why not Youngstown? We want to do that, albeit on an even bigger way in Toledo, Ohio, where people say, how did you get that person at Toledo, Ohio? Somebody's got to be first. The reality is Zach Brown Band was the first act that they hosted over in what they call Wildlife on the east side of the state over in Youngstown. And they cross so many different genres, a broad selection of people. I mean, our college students are excited about this. I've heard from a much more older seasoned crowd that they're excited about it. And I think it touches a broad group that really fill the glass bowl for the first iteration. Once we have proof of concept this May, I think you're going to see a level of act unlike anything we've ever seen here before, because every other act's going to call and say, hey, what was your experience like? Did the fans show up? How easy was it to set up inside the glass bowl and get through? Those agents want to see somebody else go through that first before they commit. But Zach Brown Band is a start, and then we're excited, 3-time Grammy Award winner. But what we build on from here, I think, will shock some people.
Hopefully.
We're excited for that.
Many of us, myself included, I've joked, if I ever ran for mayor, and I could do that this year, I guess, my campaign would be less potholes, more pop shows. Yeah. But I've had this discussion being in this business for so many years now. Like, there's not much of a reason, monetarily mostly, and geographically as well, for a lot of those acts to come here, because they're not going to come off of an opening tour from Detroit to come here for a one-off night. But maybe the Zach Brown is the beginning of building something where we can spread our wings outside of the country genre for the big concerts we have here.
Yeah, I've learned more about the entertainment industry than ever before in the last 2 years.
What are you most surprised about it?
Well, the fact that all these artists sign radius contracts where they can't perform
60 miles usually,
and so that ends up blocking a lot if you're not ahead of the game. And it wasn't as hard for us to get the main act, but even the supporting acts beneath that, because everybody's signing these radius agreements so far in advance to try to pull it together, presented a challenge. But what we're hoping for is this year we have a one-day event, a full lineup, and we're excited about that. In the future, how do you blend this into a full weekend?
Yeah.
Because you've already put the stage down, you put the field cover in, the infrastructure is there. How do you get a second night? And then that second night or that first night, maybe in the reverse, how do you mix up the genres? Because we had conversations about other genres, but trying to find that sweet spot that draws the kind of crowd that packs a football stadium is a little different than what it would be to try to pack Savage Arena, right? And so trying to find that even ground, but we think we found it for the first year. But I'm really excited for what year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are going to look like, and the impact this is going to have on our economy as we talk about hotels, restaurants, outside visitors saying, I'm coming to Toledo, Ohio for the weekend because there's something big going on. I think that helps all of us. It helps our area employers.
Yeah.
Show a different quality of life. It's going to help our campus bring more visitors and think about, okay, what would it be like to go to school here? Everybody wins in this equation. Again, behind that Team Toledo mantra, how do we find those answers that answer everybody's challenges?
Without those ironclad contracts, if you could wave your hand and bring somebody to the stadium for Bryan Blair's Glass City Live, who would you bring?
It's funny because anybody knows me knows I'm a big 90s R&B fan.
Okay.
Right? So, like, I don't know that my taste in music packs football stadiums.
It's okay. Just tell me.
I would say Taylor Swift.
Okay. That's not 90s R&B. Yeah. Well, all right, Taylor Swift isn't coming here. How about a little bit more reasonable?
No, I don't do reasonable.
Okay.
I dream big. I think I would want the biggest act that makes people say, holy cow, I can't believe they got that person in Toledo, Ohio. Right? And so Taylor Swift or somebody Taylor Swift like that, if I told you I could get her and you would laugh at me, that's the person I want.
Taylor Swift will be here on her retirement tour in 2063.
If that gives me 30,000 people in the glass bowl, I'm all for it. But we want people to say, holy cow, I can't believe they did that in Toledo, Ohio. That's how we stretch beyond what we are to what we can be. You don't get it by agreeing to what is a foregone conclusion. Yeah, they could do that in Toledo, Ohio. You get that by getting people to dream bigger than what we currently are. And I think that's the type of artist I want here in the future.
So how about Blair Fest? I'm just pulling this out of my head here. We'll do, and please add to this, we'll do Jodeci, Drew Hill, Color Me Bad.
Yeah.
Who else?
Yeah, well, you throw some 112 in there.
Yeah, but maybe only Slim.
You get 112. Maybe even like some old school Silk.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they're still around or performing, but I would bring out all the hits.
Boys to Men.
Yeah, that would be
now we're
really
putting
good.
This together.
Yeah, I mean, my dream one day, I joke with my wife, is to own a barbecue restaurant. We've talked about this and play nothing but 90s R&B all the day, and it's R&B and barbecue or some funky name, but that'll be my retirement plan.
As many of my my black friends have told me because of the music that I like. I've always joked that there is like this was years ago. There's a middle-aged black woman in me somewhere because of the music that I like. And they're like, you are always welcome at the barbecue.
Yeah.
Okay, super serious stuff now. And for those listening on Contact, a longer conversation will be on the podcast. Can you explain to me and to everyone what the house ruling is?
Yeah, try to do this as succinctly as possible, but big picture, there was a lawsuit by a young person, more or less, saying the NCAA is capping the compensation for athletes to just a scholarship. And so our student athletes, by and large, have always received a scholarship. Some are on full scholarships, some are on 25%, 30%, 75%, depending on the sport. What this will do is allow institutions to not only do the full scholarship, but to share a broader number with your student athletes, by and large split by who generates the revenue. And so what I think you'll see via the House settlement is the ability for institutions to say, hey, football generates 85% of our revenue. We're going to take a pool of $20 million and give them 85% or 75% or whatever that percentage is. And our coaches can decide who on their team gets what amounts to drive production on the football team, success of the football team, notoriety of the football team under the notion of NIL licensing. So you'll have that going on. I think separate from that, but right in line, you've got Ohio House Bill, I think it's 351, that allows institutions to pay athletes for their NIL directly, regardless of the House settlement. So a sneaky secret is the schools in Ohio actually have a head start than the rest of the country, and there's a handful of other states that we can directly plan for paying student athletes for their NIL rights, their name, image, and license rights now. And so what does that mean? That means I can go to my starting quarterback and say, hey, here's what I'm willing to compensate you for. But also, I want you to help market the university. I want you to appear on this show. I want you to be in this commercial for the university, vice versa. So it's going to change the way we look at college athletics, in my opinion, for the better. I think the last 3 years of chaos and having to have outside third parties, but that couldn't be directly involved with the university, but they're helping supplement NIL, just haven't been a healthy mix. And so I think this is all moving us towards a healthy mix of what college athletics is. I don't think it's the end point. I think this is a stop along the way. But I do think it's going to make all of our jobs a little bit easier, a little bit more streamlined, and allow us to have better communication with our fan bases. I mean, the last couple of years of, hey, Eric, you want to support NIL, go talk to Joe down the street, that's over. Now I can say, hey, make a donation to the Rocket Fund. We'll help take it from here, and we'll work with our coaches.
Somebody might have thought about this when you said you can go directly to the quarterback. One of the things that I think a lot of ADs and coaches have clamored for, as it's been the wild, wild west, as kids have transferred like numerous times for a variety of reasons, was will they have to sign a contract? Should they have to stay a specific amount of time rather than jumping from school to school? Will that be involved in this at all?
So I don't think you'll have a contract that prohibits movement. I think you'll have a contract that really speaks to their NIL rights, and if you're not here, you don't get this amount of money. We're not quite at employment yet. That's a conversation to be had. I also think there's a lot of court cases out there lingering that could have an impact on what that looks like. I think Congress is now involved in whether they want athletes to be employees or not. I don't like employment just because I think it starts to pull away from the student athletes actually being students and only being athletes. And I got into this because I saw myself and so many of our teammates that wouldn't have gone to college but for sport. But because we played a sport, because we got that college education, we then went on to better our lives and have careers beyond athletics. I think if we lose that, we lose a big piece. Second only GI Bill, college athletics provides more scholarships than any entity across the entire country. That's forgotten about because we talk about the top 5% and what they get. So I want to find a way to move into this new era, continue to enhance what we do, and certainly have success at the University of Toledo, but not lose sight of the degrees. I had breakfast this morning with our Dean of Engineering, and we're talking about all the creative collaborations we've got going on between athletics and engineering, and how many of our student athletes are engineers here, where most schools tell you can't be an engineer and a Division I student athlete. We've got something really, really special at the University of Toledo, and I don't think this new era means we have to set that aside. I think we embrace what's new while holding on to what's made it special. What's the
$20.5 million revenue sharing all about?
So that's the for lack of better words, the cap or the ceiling on what you can share. I can tell you at the University of Toledo, we're not going to be at $20.5 million. Right. But your schools like at Ohio State and Michigan certainly will be, I would guess. And then you're going to have everything in between there and nothing within Division I. And so each institution is going to figure out how much of that is what they want to spend. I mean, some of it just comes down to priorities, right? What do you prioritize the most? Is this the most important thing for you? I would say for us, and we rolled out our strategic plan 2 years ago, recruit, retain, develop the absolute best teammates is number one on our strategic plan. That's coach, that's student athletes, and that's staff. Well, a big feature of recruiting and retaining those student athletes now is this NIL bucket. So I had a conversation with my staff yesterday and told them, you've all got opinions on this new era of college athletics and NIL. I get that, and I don't want to diminish those opinions. But for what we need to do going forward to serve our university and serve our community, your opinions don't matter right now. Let's put those opinions on the shelf and focus on how we can maximize this opportunity, specifically in some of our revenue sports, to take a whole new step forward, maximize the exposure that we bring to the university and community, maximize the community engagement and how many fans and visitors we invite onto our campus, and maximize how we take this moment and really turn it into a movement where we move from being the best program in the MAC to one of the best programs nationally, full stop. I think that's our plight, that's our vision.
Where does that money come from?
Yeah, from a lot of different pockets, right? We generate a significant amount of revenue, over $15 million right now. Some of that, well, all of that will come from that bucket, but that's part fundraising, part TV contracts, part sponsorships, partnerships, ticket sales. All these things generate revenue. Concerts, outside event rentals, facility rentals, all those things generate revenue. So constantly looking for new revenue streams and trying to stretch the ones that we have. And then certainly our institution supports this as well, as they do 90% of institutions around the country. And we ran a study, I guess, a year ago, and we had a group come in and say, what's the fair market value for Toledo marketing? Like Toledo athletics, if you didn't have Toledo athletics, how much would you have to spend in a marketing budget to replicate what they provide the university? That number came out to $81 million. In that, if you dropped athletics completely and we didn't invest, and the university had to find a marketing mechanism via social media ads, radio, TV, whatever it may, they would have to spend $81 million to replicate what we provide. And I would argue it wouldn't be as engaging because you can't spend that money and get a group that brings 25,000 people onto your campus to celebrate your brand and feel a part of something bigger. And so we feel like we're worth it, and I think all those different confluence of factors make for an exciting future.
I want to come back to that $81 million number in a moment. The question I asked you, I think both times we've visited and maybe some other places, but I want to hop to, this has been the wildest time in college sports, probably in human history. Yeah. You're a bright guy. You think outside the box. You've got great ideas. Has there been anything where you've gone home to your wife and said, I didn't see this coming?
Oh, yeah, every day. Every day.
I meant in regards to NIL, yeah.
No, every day I tell this joke. If I'm sitting in staff meetings talking about something, any moment now my phone could buzz from Twitter and there's an announcement from Pete Thamel or somebody, and it's like, well, I didn't see that coming. And so I think you just get used to this. And I told my staff at all staff meeting, if you're thinking the end is in sight or there's going to be a period where we revert back to what we were, like, get that wish out of your head. That's not happening. And I think if you can get comfortable with that, you can get comfortable with moving forward in this sea of change. I would also argue the last 3 years we've had more success as an athletic department than ever before in our history. I don't think that's a coincidence that success has coincided with the most chaotic period in college.
And athletics. You being here.
Well, I don't know about all that, but
it seems to sync up pretty well. I saw that quote in the Blade article, and you have taken advantage. You have hopped into the stream and kept up with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the things that the University of Toledo did when they hired me is I was the youngest AD in the country. And I say that not as a bragging point, but I say that as I'm not constrained by what was, because I wasn't in the industry when it was. I wasn't an AD before when the certain rules were in place. So all I really know is this period of change. That's all I know. So I'm not, oh, golly, I wish we could go back to 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was just getting out of law school, for lack of better words. I mean, this wasn't my reality. So my reality is this period of change. My reality is how we take advantage of this period and turn it into more success. And I think there's an advantage and a positive mindset amidst this chaos. I think you see a lot of administrators and coaches, oh, I hate this new time period. I wish we could go back to what it was. Every minute you spend thinking about trying to get back to what was is a minute you could have spent thinking about how to get better right now. We are focused on the future. We're focused on the right now, and we are determined to build an advantage over our peers in this period of change. So on the other side of that, which I predict the next 5 years, we're in a whole new round of conference realignment. Toledo is the best version of itself. And whatever that means then, we need to be peaking right then.
Okay, conference realignment can take me back to the $81 million if there was no athletics to keep the university moving. I've brought this up to you before. Calm my fears. And it it seems like it's getting closer. The SEC and the Big Ten wanting to combine and make their super conference of 34, 36 teams. What happens if they do that, as they're already arguing for more teams in the playoff? The 12-team playoff will be a very short-lived thing. What happens if they get their wish and they're able to break away from the NCAA and all other schools, the MAC, the America East, everybody, and they form like their own league, and it monopolizes all the TV money, and everybody like Toledo is kind of left out to dry? I would think if they take all that TV money, where could you possibly get revenue from to ensure that mostly the football program keeps running so that all the other programs keep running? And in our situation being an in-city urban university, if the football is not there, I mean, the university could collapse on itself. How does this dark vision not play out?
Well, I mean, I think a couple things, right? Like, one, that vision is already taking shape, right? The SEC and the Big Ten have already gobbled up all the TV money. I mean, they get $50-60 million a year in TV money. I get roughly $800,000. And so to some degree that's already played out. And again, we're okay. We're in an okay spot. And oh, by the way, we put a beat down on the SEC team just earlier this year. So we're really excited about what that pertains for the future. Because you fast forward and then we beat an ACC team on the back end of that. So despite that revenue discrepancy, we can still line it up across from you and play ball. I think what the future looks like, I predict most of these TV contracts and media contracts come up in about 2030. And so we're about 5 years from that. Over the course of 5 years, one, we need to be the best version of ourselves, because I think there could be a broader division happening that'll set the course for probably the next handful of decades. I've used this term trifurcation. I think that top group, the Big Ten, SEC, whoever it is, and those top elite brands that garner the most TV dollars will kind of pull themselves together and say, hey, we got our own thing. We got our ball. We're going to go play somewhere else. And then you're going to have everybody else in the middle of probably that bottom tier Power 5 and that top tier G5, and then you're going to have a bottom tier. I want to make sure Toledo's got access to that second tier, right? When that, I won't name names because I'll get in trouble, but in that bottom tier Power 5 program has to drop down, we're playing in that pool as a top G5, and we've got something in common. I'm not with the bottom of Division I. And I think that will have a future together with that top tier. I don't think they can completely walk away. I think there's too many antitrust issues. I think there's too many politicians in Washington, D.C. that did not graduate from a Big Ten or SEC school, right? They graduated from a Toledo, or they graduated from a Cincinnati, or they graduated from something outside of the Big Ten SEC. And I think some degree that keeps some semblance. And I think they need us, right? The NCAA tournament is not the NCAA tournament but for Butler or VCU or George Mason. The NCAA tournament isn't the big brand that it is and the big event and spectacle that it is because of the big brands. It's because that underdog story, and that underdog, that David and Goliath, and David can slay Goliath at a moment's notice. You need that for college football. You need that for college football playoff. College game day is not college game day if you solidify it into only the top 25 brands, right? College game day is great because they go to James Madison and you've never been there before. They come to Pullman, Washington when I'm at Washington State, and we're up at 3 o'clock in the morning absolutely losing our mind. They say, this is the greatest show we've ever had. Like, that's what makes college game day. That's what makes college sports incredible. It's not the big brand. I mean, college game day goes to Ohio State every once in a while. I would argue those are letdown shows, because the passion, the energy, the uniqueness of it, it just isn't there, right? But when I see them go to a place they've never been before and they show up at a James Madison, I'm intrigued on every bit of that show because it's just so unique, it's so novel. I want to pay attention. And so they need us. They may consolidate certain aspects or take control over some of the power and decision-making, but I don't see that happening in short order. And so if we can peak in the next 5 years and be who we need to be, I think there's still a place in big-time college football and college sports for a place like Toledo.
I'm still worried a bit. It all makes entirely great sense. I worry that TV executives, that Amazon, because it is great with the smaller schools, but at the end of the day, the tournament usually winds up being Duke versus Gonzaga. I mean, that's we love the first weekend, the frantic nature of it, and we can't have that without the smaller schools and the annual 12-5 upsets. And I know basketball doesn't really make nearly as much money as football. Football is a Goliath, and I just get worried that Amazon could salivate over the fact, are you telling me we could have Amazon game day every week? Ohio State versus USC, Michigan versus a great Washington team. And you've got TV executives here who could salivate over that and just write them a check to kick away the NCAA tournament and you and us.
Yeah, I mean, they could. But I don't think there's enough numbers there to make the inventory work, right? There's too many. You got 4 different time zones you've got to placate. And you've got all those windows on all those networks. There's not enough teams in the top 40 or 50 to match up wise to fill all those TV slots. So I think, one, they've got a sure inventory standpoint. I think, two, like, if that would be the case, the Mud Hen and the Walleye wouldn't exist as entities, right? There's a way around it, even absent the media piece, that we can exist in our entity and be successful. It may look different, but I'm not one that buys into, well, this will be the end of it all. It just may look different. I mean, but the reality is the SEC schools, that Mississippi State team that we played earlier this year, gets about $50 million in revenue from media every single year. I get somewhere between $800 and $1 million. But on that Saturday, when we lined up between the lines and beat them by double digits, none of that mattered. And I think that'll continue to be the case.
The other question I've asked you before, what happens if those conferences pull away and they refuse to play you because they don't need to anymore and that payday goes away?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hit, but I mean, our budget's somewhere between $38 and $40 million. That represents $1 million of it.
Okay.
And so, again, not ideal, not the end of the world. We can survive it. But again, I think those schools are going to want and have to play us because the people, the decision makers, the politicians in your state house, the politicians in D.C., by and large, did not all graduate from 30 SEC and Big Ten institutions. They graduated from a lot of these institutions, and even to Division II, Division III, and the like. There's a shared interest in making sure college athletics, to some degree, stays broad. And I believe in the greater good to self-correct this to a certain degree and not let the selfish intentions of 1 or 2 conferences take over.
And I'm a streaming wonk. I have way too many streaming services, way more than I need. But I like they're called fast, free, ad-supported TV, like Tubi and what are some of the maybe in 5 years, which will be here fast. 1995 is 30 years ago. That's terrible. Maybe if like Amazon were to pay just the Big Ten and the SEC, and I do believe that that Toledo would be at the top tier of, we have FBS, FCS. If there was FAS, we would be in that middle ground. And maybe the games aren't on ESPN2 anymore. They're on Tubi or some of those smaller streamers, which will write you a check that keeps the thing chugging along.
Well, the reality, one, I love Tubi. I'm a big Tubi fan. The old school movies that I can pull up from the 90s.
Pluto is also great.
Yeah. So I lived my mindset in the 90s maybe. But I think the opportunity for visibility there and to rethink our model has benefits too. Right. So we played BG on a Saturday this year for the first time in like a decade.
Yeah.
What if that game was on a Saturday every year because we weren't bending over backwards to try to comply with ESPN?
Right.
That's a big money swing for our department to have that stadium full on a Saturday, playing your crosstown rival or nearby rival. Those are big swings. Right now, we moved our basketball game versus BG to a Friday at 6:00.
This was a bad weekend. This past weekend.
Yeah. It wasn't,
the losses.
It wasn't ideal in any way, shape, or form to play that on a Friday versus a Saturday. But national TV raises their hand. We've signed contracts in the past to say we have to placate. So I actually think moving away from a model that we're solely dictated by TV gives us more Saturday games in the Glass Bowl, gives us better kickoff times where we can control the best time for us. So there's some minuses, certainly. There's also a lot of pluses, too, and I think rethinking that model could be healthy.
You get to do what I think you love doing best and think outside the box and come up with an idea that many people would go, well, why the hell would we do that? Yeah. Because you get to have a little bit of fun with it. So I love that. Do you steal anything from my point of references would be like when I lived in Saginaw, there was Saginaw Valley State. They had a pretty high-level football team for the level they were in. Mm-hmm. I go back to the Lehigh Valley. There was Lehigh and Lafayette. Mm-hmm. All these schools had football teams. Do you cherry pick from how those, if this goes the way that I'm thinking of, it could be really awful. Do you cherry pick from those smaller schools where they can't count on that big TV revenue, ideas from them to make Toledo and other schools continue to press forward so everything functions as it always has?
Absolutely. So I played FCS football at Wofford College. Wofford never played on TV.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we played on FS1 or one of the smaller regional brands, but we weren't dictated by ESPN. We weren't appearing on ESPN. We didn't play football for a TV contract, but we found a way. And we had a highly successful program. We played in the national semifinals when we were one of the top teams in FCS, and it was a great experience. So you had student athletes, and I think sometimes we focus so much on the business side, we don't talk enough about the life-altering impacts of college athletics on our student athletes and the life lessons they learn from adversity and leadership and the like. I think we have to keep that up front and center. I think you think about how it engages a campus. When you have a football program, take the media out of it, There's nothing else that happens on a college campus that brings that amount of people onto your campus on a regular basis to engage with the broader university. That helps our broader philanthropy and goals as an institution. So those two things happen whether TV's involved or not. And then there's the business side of it. And I think there's a way to think creatively about with TV, without TV, or maybe a middle zone where it's this ad-supported streaming structure that we can do a little bit more, do a little bit different, and find ways to support us financially. And so those things get me excited because when I'm playing on MACtion, I'm basically taking 2 games out of my inventory from a Saturday. And if you're a season ticket holder, you're a sponsor, whatever it may be, you don't now get that inventory. If I add 2 more Saturdays to the mix, well, guess what? The price tag goes up on your suites, on your sponsorships. So everything's not doomsday. I actually think, if I'm being honest, if we switch from MACtion to Saturdays, I think it'd almost be a revenue neutral decision for a place like Toledo.
Thanks for all the business. Let's do some fun things. Yeah. It's been a disappointing season for the men's basketball team. Here is my I'll go to a total optimist from doomsday and naysayer. This is as bad as I can recall them being in some time. I don't know why that is. I follow the women much more closely. I'm wondering if this is the year where they stunningly run the MAC tournament and finally get into the tournament on the year that they shouldn't after 4 decades of not being in there. Many of those years, they should be in the tournament, but they get upset in the MAC tournament.
Yeah, I mean, that's the optimism.
Knock on wood.
I think the men's side of the MAC this year is up for anybody. I mean, yeah, we had a rough night the other night at Kent State. Mm-hmm. I was there in person. I watched it, and that wasn't the level of play that we've come to expect from Ty Kowalczyk and his team. But you go back a couple of weeks, and we go to Ohio, who was predicted to win the whole conference, and we beat them on their home floor by multiple digits, right? So which team are we? We're both of those teams. And I think really in the MAC, you look top to bottom, nobody's unscathed. Everybody's beatable, and whoever has a hot night takes off. And I think that's what I look forward to this conference tournament because there could be chaos. And again, we talked about this at the start of the podcast. Chaos has been good to the University of Toledo. So I'm hopeful for that chaos, but I also understand we won 4 straight regular season championships, and we've run away in the regular season the last couple of years. Certainly not having the year we expected to have this year. Next year's a new year too. And so I don't want to cash in on this season because I think that we've got a lot to play for, but also looking forward, I have faith in that staff to pull together and say, hey, what are the pieces we need to get back to where our expectations are?
And maybe this year Toledo is finally the beneficiary rather than the victim of all the chaos. Coach Kowalczyk must have had to split his brain the other night. Worst loss in his tenure, but yet his kid winds up on SportsCenter. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. His son is an incredible athlete. He's an incredible young man. I love engaging with him. And Todd and I, we talked the night before the game at Kent just about his recruiting process, his maturation process. Incredible athlete. I mean, I can't talk recruiting on here, but I think he's going to make somebody a great prospect overall and just tremendous young man. And so excited for our whole community. I think there's some things to build on, and certainly this is a setback. So we got to appreciate what has happened, right? We've hoisted a lot of trophies over the last couple of years, but also we're never settled at Toledo. And that's across the board in every department, every sport. Where we're at is not where we're going. We're never going to say, let's run it back and redo what we did last year. If we win a national championship here, my next night I'm thinking about how we win another national championship and do it faster and better than we did before.
You're the Jalen Hurts of ADs.
I don't know about that. That's a good-looking guy.
I following stuff back home and watching the Super Bowl, obviously, it was joking with my friends. I'm like, we sent the most miserable, and you might have seen the commercials on the Plutos and Tubies. We sent the most miserable person, because he was the Super Bowl MVP, to the happiest place on earth. He probably brought all of Disney World down, thinking about, like, when are we getting back to practice and all that stuff.
I'm a pretty miserable winner. I'm the first to acknowledge that. There's not a whole lot of accolade, pat yourself on the back, be happy with it. It's always what's next. It's always how can we get better. But I think as a leader, it's my job to look around the corner and try to make sure we're set up down the line for success. And so I can't live in the moment so much. And sometimes that hurts you to not live in the moment and not enjoy what's happening because I'm so worried about what's down the line and how I make sure our organization gets there.
That's why you're so great. I'll pat you on the back for it verbally. It sucks that leaders, wherever they are, have to make decisions for the future, decades down the road. Meanwhile, the people that are living in those communities, we use Maumee as an example. They had a vision to, I know you live around there, modernize Uptown so that Uptown didn't turn into a desolate wasteland. Meanwhile, you've got a lot of people really ticked off, but council had to look to the future to keep things going. So I applaud, as you said, seeing around corners, because it's such a huge part of your job, and it's challenging because in a way you almost have to predict the future.
Yeah, I think sometimes you make decisions and not everybody understands those as a leader, because they say, well, that didn't make any sense based on these current factors. But one, oftentimes you have way more information that you can't share broadly at your disposal. And two, again, you got to see around the corners. I give full credit to my law school professors. I think when you go to law school, I didn't realize this before I went to law school, they completely reprogram your thinking in terms of how you articulate yourself, how you write, but more so how you think about things. And so you think about things in best case, worst case, and probably most likely, and you're able to argue with yourself internally. I talk to myself a lot in terms of all the different outcomes and why this decision will equal X, Y, and Z. And so you're never surprised by whatever decisions because you fully thought through all the different options. But I think it leads to better decisions. And I tell people, I think law school allows you to see the future a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, you might see all three versions of what it might pop up, and you don't know which version is going to be true. But you make a plan, you make a decision with all three in mind and understanding best case, worst case of all of them. And so I do a lot of that in my free time if I'm driving or in the morning getting a workout. I'm always thinking about all the different possibilities and how whatever we're doing now might respond to those different variables.
So there was a nugget of wisdom in there. When you think of a decision that is made, try to think of all the possible outcomes, even if you don't like many of them. That you bring up lawyers. That's what I believe Shakespeare wrote, unless it was apocryphal. Kill all the lawyers. Yeah. The other thing you made me think of was I forget where I got the line from, but a leader can be questioned by everybody. They can't question themselves. They've got to have that conviction, even if it doesn't turn out to be the way it is. And if you work for a great place, and you do, you have the latitude to make mistakes. Because, God, what was the thing I saw the other day? Never mind. I have one more fun question, and then I have other fun questions, and then you're allowed to leave. Did you really lose a powerlifting contest to the future Pope, Will Heller?
I'm not sure I lost. No, we did get up early one morning and get in the gym in Savage Arena and lift some weight. He's a very strong young man.
Yeah.
He's slight in build, but he's incredibly powerful. And so I did a lot of powerlifting after I played college football and got into competitions and bought a singlet and a weightlifting suit and all this kind of stuff. And you do the bench, squat, deadlift. And that fed my passion for competing for a little while. And then you realize your joints aren't built like they used to be. So you back off of that. There's no amount of official that makes up for getting older. But to see him and what he's done and what he continues to do on a national stage is pretty cool. And then to have his dad, and you can see where he gets his passion from. I don't know.
Not his body.
No. I don't know that Jim's engaging in the powerlifting, but his passion for his craft and how devoted he is to bringing to life our women's basketball contest and engagements, it's inspirational. I watch and say, okay, I hope I bring that much passion to what I do. And to see his son bring that passion to the weightlifting, it's clear that the apple didn't fall far from the tree.
We're talking about Will Heller, who is just about an Olympic-level powerlifter, son of Jim Heller, who is the women's basketball play-by-play guy and an old friend of mine. I doubted it because you are intellectual, you're thoughtful, you're the kind of person I wish we had more people here. I wish we could attract more people like you and keep people like you here in the area. And I think we're doing a better job of that. But again, major cities attract those kind of people. So I was doubtful that we'd be having this conversation now all these years later. But you're here, and from what I gather, I think you really like living here and working here.
I do. I tell this story all the time. My wife and I were going, I think, out to dinner, and we sat in the car, and I was talking about something. I don't know what I was talking about. And she looked at me. She's like, "You really like it here, don't you?" Like, sometimes she thinks I'm just saying stuff to say stuff or be a politician around town. She's like, you honestly really like it here. And I do. I think, part of this is just perspective. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina. When I tell people middle of nowhere, like I run into tractors all the time going into school. There was pine trees, cotton fields, and dirt roads where I'm from. Like, there was no life whatsoever. You hunt, you fish, you play high school football. That was it. And so, like, when I'm in a city like Toledo, for a lot of people, they're like, this isn't that big. For me, it's a monstrous city. And I lived in Houston, Texas, and I was in a huge city, and it was not a happy experience. I had to live outside of town. I battled traffic every day. People were rude to each other in traffic. It wasn't enjoyable at all when I had to move outside the city. Then I went to Pullman, Washington. Again, very much like my upbringing, middle of nowhere, no connectivity. Had to drive an hour and a half to get to the closest Chick-fil-A or Target. Just it's about as remote can get. So when I get to Toledo and I've got everything I want around me, I don't run into traffic. And then if I need to get to Detroit or Cleveland, I've got that nearby driving distance. And, oh, by the way, my wife's from Ohio, so my in-laws and my kids' cousins are 2 hours down 75. Like, it's just this perfect marriage of everything that I need in life. And I'm at a place that allows me to dream big and think about goals and set and lead with ambition. And we've got a fan base that supports our enterprise, right? And so I think you got to be really careful in life not to constantly be thinking about what's next and looking beyond and saying, well, I hope I'm here, I hope I'm there, versus live in the moment. Because just like I talked about with our student athletes in the transfer portal, the grass is not always greener. And you think it is because it's easy to get flirtatious with these ideas of what could be or this brand or that brand. But when you've got happy, stay in happy and be happy where you're at. And I think that's where I'm at in this moment in my life, where my kids are happy, my wife's happy. We love this community. I love my boss and Matt Schroeder and what he's about and what he's bringing to the university. And we got a great group of coaches. And the thought of not being here to see Jenny Bogus continue to lead, or Jessica Bracamonte, or JC Dyer, or see Todd rebound from whatever this year is going to end up being to what that next stage, or Jason Candle taking us that next step as a football coach. Like, all these things get me excited because I can dream about what can be. And I'm not at one of these institutions where you can't dream. I think there's some institutions in the MAC where, quite frankly, if I was sitting in front of you, I couldn't say half these things because they're just not realistic at the location. Here at Toledo, we can dream and dream big. And I just got off the phone with a consultant before I walked in here, and they were saying the same thing. What we see nationally, you're at one of those top 10 brands in the G5 that can think about bigger and think about what you can be. And that's a great place to be.
To your point in the Blade article, and if a sports fan wants to scour the catalog of schools, they should. We have a good football and basketball program, and not many universities have that if you really dig in and think about it.
No, I think every school has to pick one or two of those things to be good at, but I would argue there's less than 5 that can say they're good at all three all at the same time. I think in the heyday, Florida had both basketballs and football rolling at the same time. Maybe Tennessee on the right year, or maybe a Texas.
Alabama now, I guess, right?
Yeah, I don't know how the women's program's doing, but
Yeah.
I think on men and women, on football and basketball. But there are very few of those programs that get to do that. And that is hard to do, right? Because that stretches your resources, your time and attention really taut. But we do that at Toledo, and we do it well. And I'm determined in this new landscape to make sure we don't slide backwards in that. And we find some other sports to be lifted up too. And I think you look at what some of our coaches are doing, and maybe some sports we struggle with historically, we've got a really bright future ahead. And our new volleyball coach, I think volleyball is one of the fastest growing sports in the country. I think he's determined to not only grow our program, but grow our fan base and get Savage hopping even before we get to basketball season.
It's not just social media back patting when you guys post things like best GPA in the MAC. Yeah. We've got the most titles in the MAC. Just because most of us focus on football or maybe basketball, regardless of the university, those other sports matter. If not to everybody, to those students who are not going to go professional and make a lot of money in those lines of work. I have one last question.
Yeah.
You're kind of on like a hyper get to know the place. You've been here 3 years, but doing what you do, even though you spend a lot of time outside of Toledo conferences and visiting places, you get to get around here a lot. So you're kind of like a veteran Toledoan now. What's something that you have discovered about Toledo in the last year since we had this conversation that you didn't know a year ago and you like to pass it along, you'd suggest it or recommend it to somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, there's my staff could probably tell you, because as I'm recruiting each of them, I say different things, and they're like, "Yeah, you're making stuff up," and then they get here and that you were not lying. I think probably a handful of things. I think our proximity to Detroit, and specifically the Detroit airport. I think when you work in the industry like I do, where I'm traveling so much, the ability to get there and get anywhere in the earth direct is a huge advantage that most places, especially in college athletics, where a lot of schools are in college towns or remote towns, don't have. And so you come to appreciate that much more when you're here. Even when I was in Houston, the ability to get across town, given the traffic, you couldn't get to the airport as quickly as we do here. Get in and out, and get to where you need to go. I think that's a huge advantage. I think the small towns outside of Toledo, Sylvania, Perrysburg, Maumee, and their downtowns, you alluded to it earlier, or Jules. I love going to one of those areas. Particularly, we go to Maumee a lot, and I go downtown and I have a cigar affair. Go to Dale's or Village Idiot for pizza, or those type of things. Inside the Five, all these different locations, and you're in almost like a small town setting. But then within 20 minutes, I can be downtown Toledo and go to a walleye game, or be downtown and eat at a great steakhouse. Like that proximity to all these amazing things just makes this a really compelling place to be. And the cost of living is really affordable here. But there's a sports culture in Ohio and in Southern Michigan to a degree that I think takes a backseat to nobody. I compare it to my time in Texas. When you're in Texas, football all the time. The entire place takes the day off when a football game's going on. I think Ohio's that plus all the rest of the sports. Our fan base here is knowledgeable. You're not going to sneak anything by them, right? They pay attention, and they know what's up, and they're involved and invested in the success. And they understand the power of sport beyond winning and losing and the economics of it, but the power of sport to uplift an entire community. I was talking to a consultant before I got here, and he brought up the example of the Mud Hens. And I think when they had the idea of building a stadium downtown, there were a lot of doubters. There were a lot of people saying, that's a terrible idea. You shouldn't invest in that. That's not worth what it is. But then you've seen over time that investment pay dividends for even broader downtown and what that looks like. But you can't do that everywhere, but you can do that in Toledo, Ohio. That's what makes this place special.
You talk about sports. You obviously got to see, I've been here now for like a third of my life, so I know why Lions fans were crying the last couple of years, tears of joy. It's been a downtrodden organization for decades, and I'm excited to see the Tigers taking up another step. I know this is a Cleveland, and it's a split area with baseball. Detroit is a great baseball city. When that team is rolling, I got to see that in 06 and the height of Verlander and Scherzer and Cabrera's career. That sinks down here as well. We're downstream from that. So it's a great baseball area, great sports town. And when these teams come back to life, the area really gets into it.
Yeah, no, it's incredible to watch. I had a group take me to a Cleveland Cavs game the other night.
They're great now.
I hadn't followed the Cavs very much. I mean, LeBron played there, and we play in that arena for the MAC tournament. And you get there, and you see that fan base on a Sunday night on national TV. Just the place was rocking, and the energy is just infectious. And you've got people that have been there through the hard years, right? So that brings out the good years. I'd say the same thing about our sports, but probably our men's basketball program the most. Every year that we don't make that tournament makes that feeling that will happen when we do make it that much more euphoric and that much more kind of really embodying the excitement of the area. And so anytime we've got a downturn or a spot that's not maybe producing or having a level of success, I always think about what it will feel like when we get on the other side of that. And I think the Browns, the Guardians, the Cavs, whoever it is you're talking about, the Tigers are great examples of that.
When the men upset their way back into the big tournament, I want a phone call. I wish we could do this all the time. I love our conversations. Yeah. Let me get you out of here and go eat some chili. Thanks as always.
No, thanks for having me. Go Rockets.